Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition, and this week it comes from Joe Redmond of Turfcast, podcast covering Burnley FC. I'm your host, Andrew Musgrove, and Newcastle will travel down to Turf Moor on Saturday for a 3 p.m. kickoff in what is another crucial game for the Magpies in the race for Europe. Joe, welcome to the podcast. How are you keeping?
Yeah, really well, mate. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome, and it's a big game for Newcastle United, but it's an equally big game for Burnley in their fight for safety. Are you looking forward to the game?
Not particular. We're obviously getting flashbacks from a couple of years ago, where all we needed to do was win to guarantee our safety. Obviously, it's a little bit more complicated than that this time. Obviously, with it not being the last game of the season and Burnley being in a worse position than what they were when we met a couple of years ago at Turf Moor. But I actually put a picture up of sort of like the Newcastle crest and the Burnley crest side by side this morning, and I put that. How's everybody feeling about the game? Then what's your early thoughts? And somebody responded like, "Yeah, just bad memories of this game," and that's kind of the overriding feeling amongst the fan base, I think.
But I guess if someone had offered you to be in this position, say a month ago, 6 weeks ago, you would have taken the hand off for it, right?
Yeah, completely. I think when we got beat at home against Bournemouth, I think we went 11 points adrift of safety. Don't get me wrong, points deductions have helped. They've brought teams closer to us. Of course they have. But even then, without them, we'd still be around 7 points off. Obviously, at the position that we're in now, we're 2 points off safety for the first time since December the 2nd. So, yeah, it's our best run of form of the season that's got us back into this position. But at the same time, that shows how bad we were for the majority of the season, while we were all just waiting for this team to click. And now this team has finally clicked. We all expected it to at some point. It's just all come probably too little, too late. But hopefully, who knows, if we get a win on Saturday and the miraculous happens at Bramall Lane and Sheffield United actually win a game against Forest, I think it's at Bramall Lane, then yeah, and who knows, we could be a point in front of Forest. So all's not done yet, but we've got the toughest run down there in terms of fixtures, I think.
And what I want to do actually is read you Newcastle's fixtures and come to a point that my co-host John Gibson made on the match preview episode, which went out on Thursday. So Newcastle obviously play Burnley on Saturday. Then they've got Brighton at home the week after, the Manchester United, and then Brentford to round off the season. And my co-host John Gibson is adamant that Burnley is the hardest game of Newcastle's final four fixtures. Do you agree?
No. I'd say it's Man United. I mean, even if the Man United games at St James's Park. I mean, I didn't know you played Man United. I didn't know you had that. I was looking at your predicament in the table, thinking, can't believe they're beneath Man United. I thought they would be above them and they'd have a chance to kick on. But obviously, if you're playing them, then I guess it's still in your own hands. But we are the lowest team out of them that you just read out. So. It'd be interesting what the thought process from your co-host is on that. I guess it's just the fact that we're fighting for our lives and we have improved our form. But it's not going to be easy for you. I mean, I know the game at St James's Park earlier in the season, you probably would say it was easy, and that's when we were pretty poor, to be fair. But yeah, it's not going to be easy, and we'll probably put up more of a fight against you than we did up at St James's Park, and probably what Brighton will when you play Brighton, because they're just on the beach at the minute with nothing to play for. But if man for man, if you look at the teams man for man, it's probably one of the easiest. But we are now coming out the other side of this ridiculous poor form that we've had. So hopefully we can put up a good fight on Saturday and definitely give a better account of ourselves than we did up north on November, was it? October, earlier in the season.
I mean, there's two trains of thought behind Gibbo's comment there. It's the fact that you guys, I think, have lost just once in the last 8 and are also fighting for your lives. So I think that's how he's come to that, and also being a little bit hopeful that Manchester United inconsistency continues to rumble on until the very end. We are actually at Old Trafford, which will make that game a little bit harder. But as you guys proved, it's not the...
we actually should have won that match. And this again is another, going back to what I was saying, like we are actually quite decent now. Like this is a side we expected to see. We just fiddled around too much with the squad, and Vincent's made a lot of mistakes. You know, he's a young manager. I think he's the same age as me. And I'm not exactly old. But, you know, he's bound to make mistakes, and he has done. And I think we're in the position that we're in because of Vincent's mistakes, because of some player mistakes, because of poor recruitment and too much recruitment. But eventually it's all just started coming to to a head, and we've started playing well to the point where we should have won at Old Trafford. And for that second half, I'll go on record easily to say that we were the better side and should have won the match.
Has Vincent Company stuck to his principles throughout the season? And now, as you say, it's starting to click. So even though it's come maybe a little bit too late, I guess he will win some plaudits for sticking to his principles.
Yes, but I think in the same breath, he'll get a lot of criticism for it as well. I think it obviously depends how you look at it. I personally do look at it of maybe giving him some plaudits. I think we will go down not just because of him sticking to his guns, but it is part of the reason. But I think with what we as a club are trying to do, like, look, for years, Burnley were pigeonholed as this horrible Brexit football, kick it in the air. It's not Burnley that do that. It's Sean Dyche. And actually, it makes me laugh because I think when you guys drew to Everton recently, I saw a comment from a Newcastle fan saying, "Oh, Everton playing Burnley Brexit football, so it's always difficult to break them down." It's like, that's not Burnley football anymore. And it's quite obvious that the common denominator in that is Sean Dyche. So we as a club are trying to move away from that with up-and-coming young managers, up-and-coming talent from across Europe and all over the world. Like, obviously, one of the running jokes back in the days under Dyche was that we'd only sign English players and stuff like that. Obviously, it was rubbish, but now we couldn't be further from that. Like, we're signing players from all over the world, and the board want the club to play in a certain way, and Vincent does that. So I think when I look at it from the club point of view and trying to put my club hat on, then yes, I do agree with Company sticking by his preference and playing the way he wants to play, and then we'll go down, we'll stick by him, he'll stick by us, hopefully, and then we'll come back even stronger. And I think we'll have another good year in the Championship next year, depending on how busy we are in the transfer market. Hopefully we're not as busy as we have been over the last two windows, but I suspect we will be quite busy. And then we'll play in a certain style again. We'll come back up and we'll be so much better for it, having done that, rather than just panicking, getting rid of Company in December and bringing Chris Wilder in, for example. That's just going backwards. Whereas doing it the way that we're doing it, hopefully we will get the plaudits for it, and we'll be able to come up, not next season, the season after, if we do go down, in a far stronger position and have a much better crack at the Premier League.
Well, for those who haven't seen a lot of Burnley this season, can you just explain to our listeners and viewers the kind of football they do play?
Yeah, so it's a possession-based style. We will try and entice you to press us and then pass it out from the back. It's essentially Man City. It's essentially a B-Tech Man City. Like, obviously, that's what Company's trying to emulate. I feel like a lot of clubs are trying to emulate that now because they're so good. But obviously, Company has City ties and he's learned under Pep. So it's essentially that. So it's possession-based football, slow build-up, trying to bring players in, the opposition in, then pass around and then quick counters, stuff like that. And like I said, we are getting better with it. We have players now that will run at defenders. We've had them all season, but we've had players that are now having success because they're learning the system more. And we have a defense and a goalkeeper that is, that we trust now as well. So a lot of it, even the goal we conceded at Old Trafford, it was a mistake. But that we're doing that less now. Like, we do it 3-4 times a game earlier in the season. Now it's like once every 2-3 weeks, which again is partly due to the style of play. But obviously, the more we do it, the better we get at it. But it's going back to your question. Like I said, it's slow possession-based football, trying to play around with it at the back, enticing teams in, pass it round them, and hopefully go up the other end and put it in the back of the net.
You see, you explaining that and describing it, passing it around the back, that should be music to the ears of Newcastle United fans, because last season, especially, Newcastle for me were the best pressing side in the country. They were so good at it. This season, with injuries, the suspension to Nari, they've lacked a little bit of that energy and a little bit of the high press, but they're still doing it in certain games. So if Newcastle United can find that little bit extra, and given what's on the line for Newcastle, the place in you from a Newcastle point of view, you'd hope they can find that little bit extra to go at Burnley and press them into mistakes, because as we saw, and as you've mentioned there against Manchester United, it's still happening at the back. Do you fear Newcastle finding that little bit extra and actually bringing the pressing game, which worked so well last season, and executing it brilliantly against Burnley?
Potentially, yes. I think the thing I fear most at the minute is Alexander Isak. I think he's a player in form. I think if he can do as well against us as he has done for the last few weeks, I think he's the type of player that we will struggle against. But as I said, our defence has got a lot better. Earlier in the season, it was pretty poor. I don't want to go in too hard on James Trafford because I've spent a lot of the season criticising him. But the fact that we have now brought in Muric just gives us a little bit extra. He catches crosses and makes saves and stuff like that. But we do feel more comfortable with him at the back as fans. And we have other players at the back as well now, like Maxime Esteve, who came in January, Lorenz Assignon, who came in January, even Darwin O'Shea, who did come in the summer, but it was pretty poor, if I'm honest, in the first half of the season, whereas now it seems to be getting better. So we're better equipped now. If Newcastle want to press us and press us as well as you did last season, earlier in the season, we probably would have 100% crumbled. Now, yeah, we might crumble, but I'd be a lot more confident of us basically passing it around you and trying to beat that press than what I would do in the early start of the season. But yeah, if I were going to fear anything, it's the form of Isak at the minute rather than the pressing game from Newcastle, just because we've got better at passing it out from the back recently more than anything.
Yeah, he's in absolutely tremendous form. I think the other funny thing is about looking at how Burnley play. I don't think Newcastle will mind too much being the team with less possession. I think, especially in recent weeks when they've not had as much of the ball, they're better for it. You know, if they can absorb the pressure from the attacking side and then hit them on the counter, that's when Newcastle really are at their best. Anthony Gordon down the wing, you know, Isak drifting in from the left into the middle, and of course the likes of Bruno in the middle of the park. I think Newcastle are much better, you know, when they do manage to hit teams on the counter. Do you look at Newcastle's away form as something to cling to? You know, they are abysmal on the road. I don't think it's unfair to say that, and that must give you guys hope that you can get a win.
Yeah, essentially, I'm going into this game now. I'm not expecting a win, but hopeful that we can get one. Whereas if we'd have played Newcastle last season, for example, I'd have been like, "Oh, it's one of the games that you just got to write off and hope you don't get spanked." Essentially, but yeah, I am going into it now thinking that we can get something. Whether we will be good enough or not, I'm not sure. Like, there's a few things that you've mentioned already that fill me with a bit of dread. Like, there's been a saying this season that to beat Burnley, all you have to do is wait. And that's what Everton did the last time we've lost. They just waited. They waited for us to make a mistake. Thinking back to the Bournemouth game we lost before this run, again, we were the better side. We had all of the ball. We created most of the chances. We just then made mistakes, or they just got the ball and countered because they just waited. They were patient, and that's what you just said. Newcastle have been more than happy to do. So, I mean, you've got better players than Bournemouth. So if Bournemouth can do it to us, then Newcastle can do it to us. But yeah, the away form is something that I've looked at and started thinking maybe, just maybe, then we can get something. But you did win obviously recently against Fulham away from home as well. Palace. The Palace result I did look at and raise an eyebrow at, but they've kind of turned the corner recently under their new manager as well. But yeah, the away form is something that I do look at, and I'm happy with playing you at Turf Moor rather than up at St James's, for example. But I think there's elements to your game that will work against us, which is the things that you just mentioned. Just happy to sit back and let us have the ball and then hit us when we make a mistake.
I think a bit like you mentioned earlier, Newcastle fans looking at the away form, they're just waiting for it to click because it's the same personnel. It's more than often the same kind of formation and setup, but for whatever reason, the contrast to the home form to the away form, it's so alarming. And against Crystal Palace, they just wanted more. They were just better in every element. They had more fight, more desire, and it actually looked like they were the side fighting for Europe, and Newcastle the side with nothing to play for. And of course, on Saturday, it's two teams with something to play for. And I think the early goal, if there is an early goal, will be absolutely key. Newcastle are starting a little bit slowly in games, and then needing to kind of kick up the backside against Palace. It didn't come. You mentioned the Fulham win down at Craven Cottage for Newcastle. They were abysmal in that game, really. And they came out better in the second half, much better in the second half. But the first half, goodness me, they were awful. They were just very fortunate that Fulham couldn't take their chances. But fingers crossed, from Newcastle point of view, it does click into place. And as bad as Newcastle are on the road, Burnley's home form isn't great. So what's gone wrong there at Turf Moor? Because, you know, Saturday's such a big game, and I'm expecting the crowd to be right behind Vincent Koeman and his men. But because I don't know, again, looking from the outside in, I always, especially in the show and dice, you kind of looked at Turf Moor as this kind of fortress, this place that was fierce and a dangerous place to go. I don't know if the results exactly married up to that, but that was the thought in my head.
Yeah.
But obviously this season, it's not a fortress.
It's interesting because I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if it's the expectation of playing at home or the expectation that we will have more of the ball and we then end up making mistakes because we have more of the ball. I think if anything, it probably would be that. Like, you just look at the last few home games now. I'm just trying to think of them off the top of my head. The Brighton 1-1. Muric made that silly mistake. I know I've just literally 5 minutes ago mentioned how he is better than Trafford, and I stand by that. But in 2 games in a row, he made that horrendous mistake at home to Brighton, where we would have won that match if it wasn't for that mistake. Obviously, Sander passed it back and he tried to control it straight under his foot. It's one of them ones that you'll see on Nick Hancock's Football Nightmares in a few years, if that sort of franchise is still going. And then who else is there? As the Wolves game, we had enough chances to put that to bed. And then obviously before that, it was the Brentford win, which we won. So I'm not entirely sure. I think it's probably just more a case of teams are happy away from home to let us have the ball, and then we just end up sometimes not really having enough quality to be able to turn this possession into clear-cut chances, into a high XG, if that's your thing, or into putting just the ball in the back of the net. And that's one of the things we've struggled with, is putting the ball in the back of the net. Like, we will sometimes go through spells where we do create a lot of chances. It will just be spells. It'll be like 10 minutes here, 5 minutes later on in the second half. But we're just not putting the ball in the back of the net as much as we should do. And we have some strikers that have shown flashes of doing really well in this league. Obviously, Lyle Foster started the season relatively well. Then he had his mental health troubles. Then he's come back. Then he's had an injury. Now he's come back again. And I just don't know if it's a bit stop-start for him and he's not been able to kick on. Then when we played Villa at Villa Park, I think he definitely scored 1. He might have scored 2, but he was fantastic in that game. And you start thinking, yes, this is the Lyle that we want to see. And then he just regresses again. But obviously, like I said, with the mental health issues and stuff like that, and the stop-start season, it could be something to do with that. But yeah, it's a strange one, is the home form, because obviously the home form is usually better than the away form. I just think that we show teams sometimes too much respect, or we did do earlier in the season anyway, at home. And I think, like I said, teams, like you said, Newcastle as well, will be in this scenario, are sometimes happy to just let us have the ball and say, right, if you want all this ball, this is the way you want to play it, fine, you do it. You then have to break us down. And then we can't do that. Whereas away from home, obviously teams come at you, they open up, and then you can capitalise on that. So I think if I were going to answer your question, I think that's what it is.
And in terms of that atmosphere, though, on Saturday, expecting quite a fierce arena for Newcastle to walk into?
I'd hope so. The atmosphere at the Turf's been a bit of a debate this season, not so much recently because the form's picked up, but at the start of the season, I'll be honest with you, the atmosphere wasn't great. Because I remember the first game at home against City, it was the Premier League curtain raiser, wasn't it? Friday night. I was actually working up in Newcastle that day. I had to bomb it back, and I just got there in time. And we were 1-0 down within 5 minutes, 2-0 down within 15, and obviously you're all buzzing, you're really excited for it, and that just proper flattens you. And there's been a lot of that this season, especially earlier. Recently, yes, it's been better. We stay in the game longer, or we get the goal. There's something you mentioned there as well, where you said Newcastle has started slowly. We've been the opposite. We start really well and then fade. So that's given me a little bit of confidence that maybe we can get an early goal. But so many times this season, and it ended up being quite funny on the podcast Twitter account, is that we'll start really well, and after about 10, 15 minutes, I'll put a tweet out saying Burnley, the better side here, started really well, just can't put the game to bed. Then the opposition scores it, it's 1-0 to them. So hopefully in this scenario, if Newcastle are notorious for starting slow and we usually start fast, then hopefully we can get the goal advantage and then make you have to come at us, and then hopefully we can then pick you off. Obviously, easier said than done with some of the quality of players that you've got. But yeah, I'm expecting the fans to be up for it. If there's an early goal to Newcastle, there might be another case of where we go again. If somebody starts playing basketball halfway through it, like Nathan Collins tried to a couple of years ago, there might be another case of deja vu, and here we go again. But yeah, I think if we will be up for it as fans, and if then the team takes it to you earlier on, the atmosphere will start building and we'll get up for it. But yeah, hopefully we don't concede after the first 30 seconds and it just knocks the stuffing out of us all.
In terms of then Burnley's main strength, if you were sitting down with Eddie Howe and he said, right, Joe, what's the one thing I've really got to look out for? What would you be telling them?
Well, I'd lie to him, if I'm honest with you. Probably the midfield, which is a worry because obviously you've got Bruno and stuff, but I think with Sander and Cullen, that midfield, it works really well. There's been parts of the season where we didn't really know what to do with Sander. Like, it was interesting because when we signed Sanderberg, I did an interview with a Sheffield United fan on the podcast, and he said, "Whatever you do, don't play him as a DM. He's an attacking midfielder, and players just bounce off him when he's trying to tackle him, and when he runs with the ball, he's fantastic." What does Vincent Kompany do? He plays him as a DM, and he sticks by it. Does Vincent? And you see flashes of this brilliant midfielder in there, but not quite every single game. It'd be like every 5 games, and then Sheffield United fans are like, "Yeah, he's like that. He's just hot and cold, mainly cold, and then he'll have a really good game, and then he's cold again." But Vincent's been trying to turn him into a different type of midfielder. And what Vincent ended up doing was, instead of him having him in that 4 role, he'd have him in the 8 role, the box-to-box type of midfielder, rather than your DM, the 6 role, rather than the DM. And now he's really good at that, at this box-to-box. Like, it gives him the freedom to run with the ball in the middle. And then you'll have Josh Cullen playing in the 6 role, breaking the player down, getting it to Sander. So yeah, if I could say our strongest point, I'd say it's that midfield. And there's been some games where that midfield has absolutely dictated the pace of the game. We might have ended up drawing the match or losing the match, but because of them two in the middle, they've been dictating the play, breaking the player down, getting it to the more flair players, or getting it to Sander, who then gets it to the flair players. But we just haven't been able to put the ball in the back of net. But yeah, I'd say the midfield is the strongest part, the centre midfield.
See, I think that's a bigger plus than you actually realise, because one of Newcastle's main weaknesses throughout this season is that the midfield is just consistently overrun. You've got a brilliant player in Bruno Guimaraes, but because of injuries, Joe Linton's missing. He's really been the big miss. Newcastle's midfield is often it's just not there. And Bruno's obviously only one man, and he's carried that midfield. Sean Longstaff playing through injury, and he's not the level we know he can be. You've got young Elliot Anderson, who's been very impressive, but time and time again, the midfield is just so easy to bypass. So the midfield the midfield battle probably will be key. In terms of the main Burnley weakness that Newcastle can exploit, are you going to share any secrets with us?
It's probably just the forward line, to be honest, at the minute. I'm not sure how you can exploit a poor forward line other than just stand off us and let us have it. The strikers have struggled to score goals throughout the season. Like I said, there's been flashes from certain players, mainly Lyle Foster. Overall, I do think we've struggled up front. I would have said the defence, and specifically the goalkeeper, 6 months ago. But we, like I said, from what I said earlier, with new players and old players going back into the squad, we have ended up being quite strong at the back. Not as strong as I'd like us to be still, because we are still making mistakes, as I've highlighted there, the Brighton one, the Man United one, it does still happen. Probably just the forwards at the minute. Like, the forwards aren't scoring as many goals as we'd like them to.
So we'll just have to, like you say, just stand off and let them continue down that road. You've mentioned a few players, but if there's one man Newcastle have to keep quiet, who is it?
Well, I'd go with Sanderberg, because again, we've mentioned that midfield battle being key, and I think if we win that, we can dictate the pace of the game, and then hopefully take it to you and create some good chances. He's the one that's he's my player of the season, Sander. Put it that way. He's been fantastic. He's been consistent throughout the season, pretty much since November. Like I said, he struggled to get going at first in this new team, but then he started playing better and getting better, getting used to his teammates and used to that role where Vincent constantly changed it, but then settled on it. And then since Josh Cullen's come in, he's been fantastic. It gives Sander the freedom to roam forward and do the box-to-box role that he does so well. In terms of actual players that can create chances and stuff, I'd probably say Wilson Odobert. Get the ball out to him, and he's a brilliant player. I suspect he won't be here next season unless we stay up. There might be a few like that, to be fair, but we'll see what happens with that one. But I think Wilson Odobert is one of the players that has the capabilities to go right to the very top. I think you will see him playing for a top 4 team in this country, or potentially somewhere else if he wants to go abroad, potentially breaking into the France national team over the next 5 years or so. He is only young. He's a very young lad, and he's got the world at his feet. And to say he's been our best creative player, pretty much, or one of the best creative players in the squad, says a lot for him and how good he can be. But yeah, Wilson Odobert and Sanderberg for me.
Big fan of Sanderberg. When Newcastle were linked to him last summer, in the January before, I think he would have been a very good addition, especially when you're looking to build a squad and make it competitive in the centre of the park. And yeah, Odobert, I remember he was probably the man who left a real mark on me in the reverse fixture. I was very impressed. I think he came off the bench late in the second half, and I think he did impress. I think only 19, so he's got definitely got his best years ahead of him.
Yeah.
You've mentioned from a Newcastle point of view, Joe. You've mentioned Alexander Isak. You've mentioned Bruno Guimaraes. If I was to ask you the man you're most fearing, is it one of those two, or is it someone else that you've got in mind?
For me, it's Isak. He's a quality centre forward. I think he goes under the radar somewhat in terms of the Premier League. People don't tend to talk about him as much as I feel like he deserves. I have a friend who's a Newcastle fan, actually. Why is a Newcastle fan when he's from Burnley? I'll never know. But I have a friend who is like me. He knows how good he is and always talks about how good he is. But other than them two, I think it's Gordon. I'm not sure how his form's been recently, but I liked him at Everton. I felt like he was never really going to work in a Dyche side. So obviously going to Newcastle and stuff was always the better step for him. I don't think he'd have done too well under Dyche, but yeah, he's fantastic. And if he can get in full floor, running at our fullbacks, depending on which side you guys tend to play him in, there might be a couple of bookings coming our way because he can be a handful. So he does worry me, especially that channel. So getting the ball to Gordon, who will then get the ball to Isak, who then obviously, hopefully for you guys, will put it in the back of the net. Fingers crossed for us, he doesn't manage to. But I think when you have players of that quality linking up, then yeah, it's always a worry from our perspective.
Yeah, Gordon's in tremendous form. Some people thought he had a bit of an off day against Sheffield United, especially in the first half, but he still grabbed an assist and then his corner led to an own goal. So not a bad afternoon for Anthony Gordon at all. All that remains to be done then, Joe, is to get your prediction for Saturday. How is it going to go?
I think we'll battle, and I think we'll run at you and we'll get at you, and I think we'll have some joy. I just think man for man, when you look at the two squads, I think you've got the better quality of player. So I think if we are going to get anything in terms of 3 points, we're going to have to be on it from minute 1 to minute 90. And the thing that worries me about this Burnley side is there's always this lapse of concentration. And there's always this bit where you just think, there's spells, but we just don't have the quality. And I think ultimately we'll end up drawing 1-1. That seems to be what we do at the minute. Like, yes, we're in good form and we've only lost 1 in the last 8, but you can flip it and say you've only won 2 in 2024. That doesn't sound that good in that situation then, does it? That's because we're drawing a lot of these. I've just got the sort of like the form up in front of me now, and there's so much red earlier in the season, and then all that just disappears now for yellow, and there's still not enough green in there. We need some green in there. We just can't turn these performances into wins, and I think it'll be the same on Saturday. And I think if we are going to stay up, we need a favour from Sheffield United, because obviously we've got you, then Tottenham, then Forest on the last day, and we have to be within 2 points of Forest on the last day thanks to the goal difference. So yeah, obviously love us to get a win, nice 2-0 win, but I just think you'll be too good for us on the day, to be honest. But I think we'll battle and avoid defeat, because that's, we seem to turn a corner. So I'm going to go 1-1.
I did also go for a draw when I was predicting it in our match preview episode yesterday. I just think Newcastle's away form just worries me a lot. The fact that Burnley can see safety, it's there in front of them. They need as many points as they can get to confirm their status. And yeah, I think it's just years of being a Newcastle United fan and being let down and them not doing what everyone expects them to do, i.e. beat the team in the relegation zone. But fingers crossed from Newcastle point of view, they do pick up all 3 wins, because in the race for Europe, a point's probably not going to be good enough at all. You need to not only be picking up 3 points, but beating those sides in the relegation zone. So we'll wait and see how it pans out. But Joe, thank you very much for providing the insight into Burnley. To you guys watching, please give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. To you guys listening on the audio platform, thank you as always. Leave us a rating and review, and head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news, including Eddie Howe's press conference on Friday morning and live coverage of this game through our dedicated Match Day live blog. And for myself, I'll see you next week.